Hey guys, Liam here. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I thought I would talk a little bit about oil and gas prices. Um, a lot of it's been all over the news lately, particularly gas prices. You and I see those at the pump every day, and a lot of those prices are caused by the global oil market. There's been a lot of talk about the United States and how much oil we consume and where we get our oil, and depending on the source and depending on the year, the data you're looking at. I'm looking at the EIA.gov website. Um, and according to that website, they say that the United States consumes about 19.5 million barrels of oil a day, and then we produce about 14.8. So that leaves roughly about 5 million barrels of oil a day that we have to import. Maybe a little bit more or less. Like I said, depends on the numbers that you look at and which year you're looking at. I'm looking at the latest from the EIA website. Where does that 6 million barrels a day or so come from? Well, we get most of it from Canada. We bought about 1.4 billion barrels of oil from them last year. Mexico was second on the list at 212 million, and then Saudi Arabia is third with about 130 million, and then Russia is fourth with about 72 million. So overall, we get about 3 or 4% of our oil from Russia, with the majority, I think more than half, comes from Canada. Um, and Globally, I think Russia provides about 10% of the oil in the global market. So if you take 10% of the oil out of the global market, then yeah, it does have an impact on the price of oil, and of course, the price of oil has an impact on the price of gas. But there are other factors involved in gas pricing, and we hear about all the big bad oil companies are making so much money, and that's yeah, they make plenty of money, and I don't like them any more than the rest of us do. The rest of you might, uh, they're not. It's really not a gouging situation right now, I don't think, because the price of fuel, price of gasoline and diesel and so forth, fluctuates. And yes, according to the price of a barrel of oil, but it's not a direct correlation because uh, oil sold, and on futures. There's oil futures, and then like the gas that was made from oil that's being sold today that oil was bought earlier, and so the gasoline prices are all based on the cost of the oil when it was refined, and all that. So um, another factor that are the taxes. There's about 56 cents, I think, in some states of taxes involved in a gallon of gas, so that has an impact. Um, and there's also all the regulation stuff. We haven't really built a refinery in probably over 40 years here in the United States, and so there's all kinds of factors involved in the price of oil. There's been a lot of talk about these 9,000 leases that have been let, that many are sitting unused by the big bad oil companies. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. A couple thousand of those leases are all tied up in permitting and in court and those types of things, and some of the others that are sitting there that might not be being used. I mean, if you look at it from the oil company's perspective, it costs a lot of money to dig an oil well and start producing petroleum. There's a lot of risk involved, and I'm not sure if I were an oil company, I would be investing a lot of that money, um, putting out all that money with the risk involved with this current administration. They might pull the plug on the whole thing at any time. So they're putting a lot of money at risk, and it could all be shut down at a moment's notice based on the way this administration has been acting lately. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is the Green New Deal people, And what I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they don't care about the environment. They don't care about the climate. Because if they did, they would be demanding that we get oil, we use our fossil fuel industry here in the United States to produce our oil. They would be demanding that because we have the most highly regulated, the cleanest fossil fuel industry in the world. But yet, instead of demanding that we domestically produce oil and making that possible, helping to make that possible, they say, "Oh no, we can't domestically produce oil because it's bad for the environment." And then they turn around and buy all this oil from these dirty fossil fuel industry countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Russia, and all that. So if they really cared about the environment, you would think that they'd want to get the oil from the cleanest possible source, and that's our own domestic oil production capability that we have here in the United States. So that just tells me it's all, all that's bullshit, and it's all about money and power and control, and they're trying to force us off of fossil fuels onto wind and solar and other sources of power, which, hey, that's great. I mean, I think we ought to have wind and solar and nuclear and all other kinds of, any other kind of energy source that we can develop. But it's unrealistic to think that we're going to flip a switch and just jump off of fossil fuels. Even Elon Musk has been talking about that lately, about how it's unrealistic that we would just jump off of fossil fuels all at once or any time in the very near future. Also, the President Biden has been talking about releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, and so I did a little research on the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, and they're able to hold about 714 million barrels of oil, and based on the amounts that they're talking about releasing from there, it's going to have a negligible effect on the price of oil, especially when we use almost 20 million barrels of oil a day, and they're talking about releasing 40 million barrels. Well, it doesn't take an Einstein to figure out that's 2 days of supply for the United States. So it's really, not going to make that big of a deal. It's just it's all kabuki theater. It's them acting like they're doing something when they're really not doing anything. And another thing I found interesting is that the average cost of a barrel of oil that's in the Strategic Petroleum Reserves today was $29.70. So let me ask you a question. What sense does it make to take 40 million barrels of that oil out of their Strategic Petroleum Reserves that we're just going to have to turn around and replace at current market value? So we're going to trade basically $30 a barrel oil for what was the price today? The price for West Texas Intermediate was $105.50 today, and for Brent it was $109. So we're going to take 40 million barrels of oil out of our Strategic Petroleum Reserves that we paid $30 a barrel for, and then have to turn around and replace it with $110 a barrel oil. That doesn't really make much sense to me. And besides that, it's going to have a negligible effect on anything. It's just, like I said, just kabuki theater, just something to make it look like these guys are doing something. That's about all. I mean, we could go really deep into this stuff and talk about, get very specific about where the oil comes from, country by country, and all that. But the bottom line is all this talk about Russian oil. Yeah, I don't think we ought to, we ought to try to hurt Russia as much as we can. But that's 3% of the oil that we import, and only about 10% of the world's oil supply. So I personally think we should stop buying oil from them and Iran and Saudi Arabia and all those places and produce our own. We've proven that we can do it, and we can do it cleaner than anybody else, and that's what we should do. So just keep all this in mind as you see all this stuff on the news, and we're really being held hostage by these Green New Dealers, and that's really what's pushing the price of oil and thus price of gas up. So I'm going to do another one of these here in a few minutes on another topic, so I hope you'll check it out, and I'll sign off for now and talk with you again soon. Thanks for watching.